Welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast about life, love, loss, and the truths we discover along the way. Together, we'll explore the struggles that shape us, the lessons we carry, and the hope that keeps us moving forward. This is more than stories. It's honesty, it's healing, it's real. Let's get started. And now your host, Glen Nunes.
Hey, welcome to Cracked Open. I'm your host, Glen Nunes, and if this is your first time here, thanks for finding your way in. And if you've been listening right along, I really appreciate you being here. And today's episode is called Humility, and it's a very strong topic. This isn't something I planned out perfectly. It's just something that I've been kind of living with, and I think we all live with. So instead of just teaching today, I'm just going to walk and talk honestly about what humility actually looks like when life strips away our control. So humility isn't something that we choose most of the time. It's something that teaches us when control slips away. So I'm not here to explain it or define it. I just want to talk about it, what it looks like, and when life humbles you, and what that does to your heart. So let's get right into this. So today, I want to talk about humility, and not the kind that's posted online, or not the kind that we pretend to have, and not the version that sounds like spiritual, but the kind that just touches real life. I want to talk about humility the way it actually shows up, when it strips you down, when things don't go your way, when control slips through your fingers, and you're forced to see yourself honestly. Because most of us, we don't wake up and decide to be humble. We get humbled. And it's happened to me, and we'll get into a couple of things later. And there's a difference. Before we go any further, I want to ask a couple of questions here, and just hold them in your head. Where did I fight reality? Where did I confuse strength with control? What changed when I stopped forcing outcomes? And what does humility look like in real life? And not like the church language. I'm talking real humility. This is for everyone. Humility means having a modest view of your own importance, being free from pride or arrogance, and recognize that you're no better off than others. It's often involving like a sense of lowliness or modesty. It's an accurate self-estimate and a willingness to learn, serving others rather than dominating them. Not thinking that you're superior or more important than others, and no more or less important than you truly are. Not necessarily having a low opinion of yourself, but considering the needs and welfare of others highly as your own. Being open to learning from everyday interactions with new perspectives. Being free from pride and a need for excessive recognition. There's a lot of people out there, they can't help themselves. They need that pat in the back. They need others to know how they have the best car or the best house or the best this, or how important they are. And it really comes down to not being humble when you're like that. And life will take all those things away. You really got to start thinking about how you treat yourself, who you really are, and not trying to impress others, because that's what most people are doing. They're lacking something, and they're trying to make themselves feel better by letting others know that they're something they're not. And they're trying to portray themselves as something that they're not, and it makes them feel better. But when you're humbled, all that's taken away. It's different from feeling insignificant or being used. It's a chosen state, not a forced one. It's a strength that allows for genuine love, for learning and service, or low self-esteem. It appears in moments of achievement, like accepting honors modestly, or adversity, handling criticism with grace. It's seen in actions like putting others first, being courteous, and having a servant's heart. And you can go look that up on the internet. Type in a servant's heart. And if you're into the biblical teachings, or if you're more spiritual, you'll have a whole day to study just on a servant's heart. So in this episode, I want to discuss how it's about loss of control, being brought low, ego versus surrender, and waiting without collapsing. So having humility means that having an accurate, modest view of yourself, recognizing your strengths and your limitations without arrogance, and valuing others' abilities and needs, fostering openness and learning and strong relationships instead of pride or superiority. It's about understanding your place in the world, acknowledging that you're no better than others, and being willing to learn from your mistakes. So knowing your abilities and your flaws realistically, not overly inflated or deflated. Freedom from excessive pride, haughtiness, or feeling superior. Showing a sincere regard for others' talents, needs, and opinions, and being receptive to feedback, admitting mistakes, and learning from experiences, because that's the best way. I talk about this a lot. I think the best knowledge you can have is experiences, and it's the best way you can speak to people. So that's a big one. And also not needing to brag or seek excessive recognition for achievements, because in the end, nobody cares. And I don't mean to be arrogant or not humble saying that. When nobody cares, sometimes what you're trying to portray yourself as, it's not important to others. They don't look at you as you're trying to portray yourself as. They look at you like you're full of baloney. That's what they feel most of the time. I'm just saying. So you have to learn humility. It's one of the most important traits we can have in life. So it's not about thinking less of yourself, but rather seeing yourself accurately, which comes from confidence. True humility isn't false modesty or putting yourself down constantly. A humble person might acknowledge when they are wrong, listen more when they talk, give credit to others, be respectful and courteous, and find humor in their own imperfections. Humility is often misunderstood as weakness or low self-esteem, but it's actually a powerful leadership trait. It's rooted in security and self-awareness, knowing what you are good at and celebrating it. True humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. Humility is not thinking that you're worthless. It's not shrinking yourself. It's not staying silent when something is wrong. And it's not letting people walk all over you either. That's not humility, because some people have the definition or the meaning, what they believe it is, wrong. It's definitely not letting people walk all over you. That's fear wearing a disguise. So real humility doesn't say, I am nothing. It says, I know where my value comes from. And humility isn't denying strength. It's knowing that you didn't create it on your own. And this is important. Humility isn't weakness, it's clarity. It's seeing yourself honestly without exaggerating your worth and without minimizing it either. So one of the most difficult sins to fight is pride. And one of the reasons is pride grows quietly. It grows in your mind, in your thoughts that we justify, in reactions that we defend. And pride doesn't always show up as arrogance. Sometimes it shows up as being defensive. Sometimes it shows up as control. Sometimes it shows up as entitlement. And sometimes it shows up as I'm right, even when you say it politely. Pride often sounds, I'm right, they're wrong, I deserve better, I shouldn't have to deal with this, I shouldn't have to depend on anyone. And what's dangerous is we usually don't even realize it's there. There's this line that I love that I found. It says, modern man doesn't see God because he doesn't look low enough. Meaning, if I'm always looking down on people, or looking over people, or looking at myself like I'm the center, I'm not going to see God clearly, because pride makes God smaller and it makes me larger. It always has to be more Jesus and less me. And that's how I live, and that's my goal in life. I'm not perfect. I don't do it perfectly. As long as that's in the back of my head, I'm ahead of the game. Okay, and you can be ahead of the game too if you just stop practicing humility, because humility is the opposite of entitlement. Entitlement says life owes me something, and humility says everything I have is grace. And that hits hard, because the truth is none of us are owed comfort. We're not owed control. We're not owed an easy life. There's an old saying that cuts real deep. It says, you were owed nothing and you were given everything. And when I forget that, I start demanding instead of appreciating. And that's where I've been humbled. And that's where a lot of us probably have been humbled. And that's where we will be humbled if we forget that. I start demanding instead of appreciating. So humility brings you back to reality. And here's the weird part. Humility is the root of everything we say we want to be. Patience, kindness, compassion, respect. And without humility, those things do not last, because pride will always hijack them. Humility doesn't usually arrive when everything is going well. It shows up when life humbles you. When the plan you were confident in falls apart, when the relationship you thought was secure disappears, when you realize effort doesn't guarantee outcomes, that moment when control slips, that's where humility is born. And most of us confuse humility with losing. Humility isn't about defeat. It's about accepting reality without pretending we're stronger than we are. There's a difference between confidence and pride. Confidence says I know who I am, and pride says I need to prove it. Humility removes the performance. You stop trying to look okay. You stop trying to manage how others see you. You stop pretending you've got it all figured out. And I'll be honest, humility doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels exposed. It feels quiet. It feels like standing when everything in you wants to fight or run. But that stillness is very important, because when you stop forcing outcomes, you start hearing the truth about yourself, about what you actually want and what matters and what never did. Humility doesn't weaken you, it grounds you. And sometimes being grounded is the only way you can stand back up. Because personally, I do talk about my personal life on here a lot. Some people think I'm crazy, but I think if it helps others who really cares. I've been in many situations where I've been humbled, and we're going to get into some of these stories later, because humility does not mean shrinking yourself, and it doesn't mean tolerating disrespect, and it doesn't mean silencing your needs. That's not humility, that's self-abandonment. Real humility actually requires strength. It means being honest about what hurt you without becoming bitter. It means owning your mistakes without taking responsibility for someone else's actions. And it means accepting what is while still knowing your worth. In relationships, humility looks like this. You stop trying to control outcomes, but you don't erase yourself to keep someone close. You stop fighting for validation, but you don't stop honoring your values. Pride says, I'll never bend. And fear says, I'll bend no matter what. And humility says, I will stand calmly, truthfully, and without force. And that's very hard, because humility means that you no longer chase, you no longer manipulate, and you no longer prove. You allow truth to reveal itself, because the truth will come out. It always does. I don't want to sit here and bash people, because that's not what this podcast is about, but there's a lot of phony people out there, and there's something that they're not, and they manipulate people, and they put themselves in positions to benefit themselves, always in the back of their heart and their mind that it's always about them. And people get tricked. They say, this is my fault, why I'm involved in this, or I'm trapped, because they get in these situations where somebody is not a humble person and they fall through the cracks. But listen, the truth will come out, and you might not be in a good position right now, but give it some time, because no matter what, you can't stop reality and you can't stop truth. And I always say this, the true colors will come out. And here's something humility teaches that pride hates. You cannot convince someone into alignment. You can't argue someone into choosing you. You can't force clarity over confusion. Humility steps back, and not because it stops caring, but because it respects truth. Truth about timing, about readiness, about what's mutual, and about what's one-sided. And humility protects dignity. You can love deeply without losing your dignity, and you can grieve without begging. You can wait without disappearing. There's a story that Jesus tells us that I keep coming back to when I think about humility. It's short, but it's uncomfortable. He talks about two men who go to pray. One's a Pharisee, a religious leader that's respected, and he's disciplined, he's moral. The other is a tax collector, despised, corrupt, looking down by everyone. The Pharisee stands confidently and prays something like this. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, not greedy, not unjust, not immoral. I fast, I give, I do all the right things. And what's interesting is none of that's a lie. He really does live that way. Then Jesus says the tax collector stands at a distance. He won't even look up. He just says one sentence, God, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. And Jesus says something that flips everything upside down. He says the tax collector went home justified, not the Pharisee. Then he says this line, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and one who humbles himself will be exalted. Very interesting. And here's the part that messes with me. The Pharisee wasn't lying. He was just talking about himself. His prayer wasn't humility. It was self-justification. He didn't need mercy. He needed to be right. And that's what pride hides. Not in obvious arrogance, not in loud ego, but in the need to explain yourself, defend yourself, and prove that you're not wrong. Humility isn't thinking worse of yourself. It's stopping the need to justify yourself before God. The tax collector didn't list his failures. He didn't explain his past. He didn't promise to do better. He just stood there admitting the truth. I need mercy. And that posture, that honesty, it's what Jesus calls humility. And if I'm being honest, I've prayed like the Pharisee more times than I want to admit, explaining why I reacted when I did, explaining why I was hurt, explaining why I was right, never asking for mercy, but asking to be understood. And humility starts when you start to realize God doesn't need your explanation. He's not impressed by your resume, and he's not waiting for you to justify your pain. He's waiting for honesty. That's all he wants. And once you stop defending yourself, you can finally rest. And that's humility. It's not self-hatred. It's not shrinking. It's just truth without performance. And waiting will humble you faster than anything. And not the kind of waiting where you're busy and distracted. The waiting where you've done everything you know how to do, said everything you know how to say, and know there's nothing left but silence. That kind of waiting exposes pride, because pride hates waiting, and pride wants answers. Pride wants closure on its timeline. Humility, it accepts something uncomfortable. You don't get to rush what's being shaped. Waiting isn't punishment, it's positioning. So when you think you're being punished, sometimes it's just positioning. So you have to think of it that way. And humility and waiting, it looks like restraint. You stop forcing conversations. You stop replaying scenarios. You stop negotiating outcomes in your head. Not because you didn't care, but because you finally trust that pressure isn't power. Pride in waiting sounds, this shouldn't be happening to me. I've done everything right. I deserve resolution right now. If you look at humility in waiting, it sounds like, I don't know why this is happening, but I'm willing to learn. I'm being shaped even when I can't see it yet. And delay doesn't mean denial. Waiting with humility changes what the waiting does to you. Without humility, waiting hardens you, and without humility, waiting deepens you. Because disappointment exposes the gap between what you hoped for and what actually happened. And pride wants you to assign blame. You rewrite history and explain the sting away. Humility, though, it sits with disappointment without decorating it. What it says is, this hurt, and I don't need to pretend it didn't. One of the hardest forms of humility, it's accepting that something didn't work even though you showed up honestly. And that's not failure, it's just reality. Because disappointment removes leverage. You can't negotiate your way out of it, and you can't perform your way past it. And you're left with a choice. You become bitter or you become grounded. Pride turns disappointment into resentment, and humility turns disappointment into clarity. Clarity about boundaries, about patterns, and what you will and won't tolerate going forward. Humility doesn't mean that you accept mistreatment. It means you stop trying to earn what should be freely given. If you want to understand humility clearly, look at Jesus. He didn't cling to status. He didn't protect reputation. He chose obedience. He chose service. And the clearest picture is when he washed his disciples' feet. Imagine that room. Let's try to vision that. They're in the middle of a meal and everyone's waiting. They're saying, like, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? And instead of giving a speech, he gets up, he takes off his outer clothing, he wraps a towel around his waist, and he pours water into a basin. And the living water starts washing dirty feet. And that's not weakness. It's authority without ego. Even Judas got his feet washed. That's a level of humility that doesn't make sense to the ego. It really doesn't. Jesus wasn't teaching humility. He was showing the pattern of the kingdom. Greatness stoops. Strength serves. Power doesn't need to prove itself. And he tells them, if I did this for you, do this for each other. So what does humility look like in real life? A humble person listens more than they speak. Humble people let work and character speak without boasting. They're willing to be corrected. They assume that they have more to learn. Humility shows up in service, volunteering, encouraging, meeting needs of others, giving, helping, and not to be seen, not to score points, but because it's who you are. And that's why I love the nonprofit organization I have, Music Gives. If you haven't checked it out, you can go on to social media or wherever and look up Music Gives. It's a guitar with a heart, and it's a nonprofit. And everyone who is part of that organization, no one's doing it to be seen or score points. And it's because of who they are. It's a great thing. In humility, it also shows up in how you see people. Looking at people through God's eyes, not through irritation or resentment or judgment. And this is huge. Humility keeps you grounded when things go well, and it keeps you breathing when things fall apart. So at this point of the podcast, I'm going to talk about a couple of stories here. Similar stories, but little different outcomes. One is about a pastor who transformed himself into a homeless person, and he went into the church that he was just going to be introduced as the head pastor that morning. He walked around his soon-to-be church for 30 minutes, dressed as a homeless person, while it was filling up with people for service. Only 3 people said hello to him, and most looked the other way. He asked people for change to buy food because he was hungry. Not one gave him anything. He went into the sanctuary to sit down in front of the church, and he was told by the ushers that he would need to get up and go to the back of the church. He said hello to people as they walked in, but was greeted with cold stares and dirty looks from people looking down on him and judging him. He sat in the back of the church, and he listened to all the church announcements for the week. He listened as new visitors were welcomed into the church that morning, but no one acknowledged that he was new. He watched people around him continue to look his way with stares that said that you're not welcome here. Then the elders of the church went to the podium to make the announcement. They said that they were excited to introduce the new pastor of the church to the congregation. And the elder said this: "We would like to introduce to you our new pastor." The congregation stood up and all looked around as they were clapping with joy and anticipation. The homeless man sitting in the back stood up, and he started walking down the aisle. And that's when all the clapping stopped and the church went silent. All eyes were on him. He walked up to the altar, and he reached for the microphone. He stood there for a moment, looking at them. And then he recited so elegantly a verse from the Bible. This is what he said: "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did you see me hungry and feed you, and thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needed clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison, or go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did for me.'" After he recited this, he introduced himself as the new pastor and told the congregation what he had experienced that morning. Many began to cry and bow their heads in shame. "Today I see a gathering of people here, but I do not see a church of Jesus. The world has enough people that look the other way. What the world needs is disciples of Jesus that can follow his teachings and live as he did. When will you decide to become disciples?" Then he walked off the pulpit and said, "This is my message." The church and the pastor of that story is not known. Then we have this story from Vertical Church. The name of the pastor in this church is Jeremiah Stepek. He transformed into a homeless person and went to the 10,000 member church that he was going to be introduced as the head pastor that morning. He walked around the soon-to-be church for 30 minutes while it was filling the people for service. Only 3 people out of 7,000 to 10,000 people said hello to him. So he asked people for change to buy food, and no one in the church gave him change. But as time went on, this church stood up. They acted as Jesus would have. Not all, but many. And I will post the link to this video in the description. I think it's a good watch. I think you should go check it out after you listen to the podcast. He went into the sanctuary to sit down in front of the church. He was asked by the ushers if he would please sit in the back. He greeted people to be greeted back with stares and dirty looks, with people looking down on him and judging him. So he sat in the back of the church and listened to the church announcements as such. When all that was done, the elders went up. "We would like to introduce to you Pastor Jeremiah Stepek. The congregation looked around, clapping with joy and anticipation. The homeless man sitting in the back of the church stood up, walking down the aisle, clapping. The clapping stopped with all eyes on him. He walked up to the altar and took the microphone from the elders who were in on this, and he paused for a moment, and then he recited that I quoted in the other story, and it kind of ended with, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of my brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" After he recited, Pastor Jeremiah looked towards the congregation, told them what he experienced that morning, and then he said, "Following in the footsteps of Jesus, Christ should be more than just talk. It ought to be a lifestyle that others around you can love about you and share in." The second story is similar to the first one, so I don't know if someone changed it, but I'm glad they did because I like the contrast here. So the first story, pretty much the pastor just walked out. And then the second story, he ends up addressing his church. But when you watch this video, about 50 seconds in, it's quoted in the video, Luke 6:32-33. And you can see what that quote says if you can either look it up in the Bible or watch the video. And the second story, in the video, people actually from his church did respond to him. And if you go up to, it's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, it's when the people start walking up to him, and it's very moving. Some guy comes up with his kid, people pray for him. It's pretty cool. And then also, in the scripture that is quoted in the video is Matthew 5:45. You can go look that up as well. And about 4 minutes into the video, and the video is not that long, it's about 5 minutes long, but about 4 minutes in, he wants to show the church a video of them responding to him as he was outside that church. It's very moving. You got to go see the video. But like recently, I ran into something where humility crossed my mind, and not for me, but it was an incident where there was a couple of people who approached me and said things to me. One was on a phone call, but a couple of them were right in front of me about this guy. I don't like to mention names on here. It was about somebody who there was no reason to pile up on this guy. And there was a lot of negative said about this guy. He's a very humble person, and he was very happy this particular day. And a couple of people said stuff to me, and I said, all I could keep thinking about was, man, you better be careful because you will be humbled really badly. And it's just sad how some people feel better about tearing down others. But that's what this story, I don't want to get into the story right here that I experienced the other day. But people better be careful because life can humble you. It can humble you without you seeing it come. That's all I want to say on that. As I was thinking about this particular thing that happened to me last week, we all have to think about it because our legacy is very important. And it may not be about fortune or fame or money or anything like that. Maybe legacy or my legacy or whoever listening, maybe it's just a message or maybe being an example, because it's important for our children to see what kind of legacy we are leaving. Is it just about fame and money and how job you have and what you own, or is it leaving behind who you really are? And that's really what's important, to be humble. And if we're not humble, let me tell you something, life will humble you. And you're going to have no choice in the matter. And when you are humbled, you're going to be brought right back to earth. So all your pride and everything will not be able to do anything for you. So I don't care how much money you have. I don't care who you think you are. Life has a strange way of teaching us what humility really is. It's best that we try to practice humility so that we're not humbled. Because when we get into pride or arrogance or take life for granted, and remember, you don't know what you got till it's gone. And being humbled can knock you right back down and take things away from you with a snap of a finger. Trust me. I've lived it. I'm living it now. And I have life experiences where I've been humbled many times. And I'm not just quoting this. This is fact, things I've witnessed. I've had things taken away from me that I won't get into here. And I've had things happen to me that, as I said in past podcasts, that would we crush somebody. And I think one of the episodes was rebuilding. Some people rebuild once in their life. I've rebuilt many times, and some of the things I've been through, some people wouldn't even made it. But I thank God every day I'm a very strong-willed person. Getting back to these two stories I told you, I'm not sure if these two stories are the same or how they were supposed to be posted, but the reason why I wanted to read both of them to you is more about the example of how we should be humble and what humility really is. And the first example, it's definitely not humility. It's everything but. And the second one is exactly what humility is. And that's the point I was trying to make here. The contrast of the one church who did not even acknowledge the homeless guy looking down at him, and then the other church stepping up. And when you watch the video, you'll know what I'm talking about, if you do watch it. And I wanted to mention a quote in the episode. It's not really on humility. It sounds like it's more like depression, what I talked about in one of my last podcasts, but it's something Robin Williams said, and I found this quote. And sometimes the most humble don't show it, but I believe Robin Williams was a very humble person deep down, and unfortunately, he couldn't beat his battle against his demons, and he lost that battle. But this is a quote from him, and I think it fits pretty good with humility. I just wanted to show you how humble it sounded to me when I read it. Robin Williams said this: "Every day, in every corner of the world, there is someone fighting a silent battle inside their mind. Depression is not sadness. It's not simply being in a bad mood. It's a weight that drags you down, an emptiness that consumes you. People believe that those who are always making others laugh can't be broken inside. But sometimes the opposite is true. The ones who bring the most light are often those who have known the darkest depths. So be kind, because you never know who is hiding a storm behind a smile." I just thought it was a very humbling quote. And go back and read it again. It definitely fits with humility. So I'm going to add a couple of songs. I usually throw some songs in the podcast. I've gotten a bunch of DMs on this and saying, hey, I like the songs that you put in. And some of these songs aren't even my favorites. I just find them and they somehow link to what I'm talking about. But a lot of them I do really enjoy. And so this one, the first song I'm going to introduce is Tim McGraw's Humble and Kind. Obviously, the title says enough of its own, and it fits, but it was written by Laurie McKenna, and there's a video of her out there explaining what the song's about. She wrote it and sent it to Tim, and then he did his version. It's a powerful song about living a life of integrity, emphasizing core values like humility, kindness, gratitude, and service, and not just wishing for success, but teaching how to handle it responsibly by helping others and remembering where you came from. It serves as a moral compass, reminding people to stay grounded, avoid bitterness, and treat everyone with grace, inspiring a movement of goodwill and personal reflection on these principles. And the second song is Simple Man by Lynyrd Skynyrd. It is recording in 1973. I didn't realize it was that old. It's a heartfelt ballad conveying life lessons from a mother to a son, urging him to live a humble, honest, and loving life rather than chasing wealth, inspired by advice from Ronnie Van Zant's grandmother and Gary Rosington's mother. The song emphasizes finding satisfaction in one's soul, and it was also done by Shinedown. I love their version as well. The next song I'll introduce is Tim McGraw's Live Like You Were Dying. It's an inspirational country song about finding life's true purpose after a terminal, life-altering diagnosis. It's co-written by Tim Nichols and Craig Wiseman. It explores shifting priorities to live more intentionally, generously, and without fear. It's inspired by personal experiences with illness. The song serves as a carpe diem mantra, encouraging forgiveness, kindness, and experiencing the thrill of life. The song centers on a 40-something man upon learning that he has limited time. It changes his perspective on what matters, focusing on love, forgiveness, and living for the moment. It encourages listeners to get the chance to live like you are dying, suggesting a life filled with gratitude and purpose rather than just surviving. And the song is deeply associated with Tim McGraw's dad, Tug, who passed away from brain cancer in 2024. The lyrics advocate for taking risks, loving harder, and becoming a better spouse, a better person, and fixing broken relationships. Tim McGraw often dedicates the song to his late father, Tug McGraw. The song is frequently cited by fans and survivors as a source of strength when facing cancer or other personal health scares. It is used as a reminder to cherish life's precious moments, such as watching a sunset, spending time with family, or forgiving others instead of wasting time on trivial matters. And there's the last song. It's called Be Still. It's by The Killers. It's not one of my favorite songs by them, but I just read the lyrics. It's an anthemic, reflective ballad centering on themes of resilience, faith, and finding inner peace during difficult times. It acts as a comforting message to stay true to oneself, emphasizing emotional strength and unwavering support. The song is often regarded as a personal, spiritual, and emotional, yet encouraging piece. It's not loud, and it doesn't fix anything, but it reminds me that sometimes humility isn't action, it's restraint. It's learning when to stop forcing, stop chasing, and trust that standing still doesn't mean you're giving up. So those songs will all be in the description along with the video from that church of the pastor that I talked about earlier. Let me ask you this. If you could name one thing, what would you say would be your ultimate goal in life? I know what mine is, but I'm just asking you to sit back and think. Think about the word humility and then ask yourself that question. Because I was just talking to somebody I love, and we were having a great conversation, and she said to me something that really linked to this humility podcast. She said, if you were living in a cardboard box and could have what you just asked in that question, then that's all it's about. And I'm like, wow, that's a very humble answer. And when I do the Music Gives things too, I have a few people who do these with me, and I remember I had to announce their names once and I'll bring them up there because I had some gifts to give away or like a recognition, and they all hate it, and I don't like it either. We don't do it for pats on the backs, but this one specific person would not allow me to bring them up on the stage and said, nope, I am not doing that. And they're just a very humble person, and I love them. I just wanted to throw that in this humility podcast because that's what humility is all about. But anyways, in closing, I just wanted to say humility doesn't mean that you stop standing for truth. It means that you just stop standing on your ego. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes life clearer. And sometimes clarity is the greatest gift. Sometimes humility isn't lowering yourself. It's accepting that you can see the truth and still not control the outcome. Humility doesn't fix everything, but it fixed me. It's about lowering your grip on being seen. So right now, I'm just going to close on a little prayer. If you enjoy the prayers, just pray with me. God, teach us humility without shame and strength without pride. Help us release what we can't control without losing who we are. Quiet the parts of us that grasp from fear and steady the parts of us that want peace. Let humility protect our integrity and restore our clarity and align us with what is true. If something is meant for us, I trust it will be meant for us without force. And if something is not, give us the courage to let go with grace. And if we're being humbled right now, let it shape us and not break us. We come to you not to be seen, not to be praised, not to be admired, but to be shaped. Teach us humility that does not perform, humility that doesn't wait for recognition, humility that shows up when no one is watching. Strip away the pride that hides behind success and the fear that hides behind the image. Help us see people the way that you see them, not as interruptions, not as inconveniences, not as categories, but as lives that you deeply love. And remind us that our time here is very short and that legacy isn't built on what we accumulate, but how we serve and how we love and how we treat the least among us. Make us humble in our victories, gracious in our failures, and faithful when humility costs us something or everything. Let our lives point quietly to you, and let the example we leave behind speak louder than any words we could ever say. We ask this not to be lifted above others, but to be formed more like you. Amen. And closing thoughts here, humility doesn't announce itself. It shows up in how we can treat people who can do nothing for us. It shows up when no one is watching. It shows up when kindness costs us something. The world will chase recognition, status, and applause, but character is built quietly, and legacy is written in the small, unseen moments. It's how we love, how we serve, and how we choose to live when pride would be easier. Long after the titles fade, long after the noise dies down, what remains is who you were when it mattered. And remember, your integrity is your legacy. Karma has no favorites. God has no favorites. and treat your neighbor as yourself. This is Glen Nunes. I'll see you next week on Cracked Open. Thank you for subscribing, liking the channel, and sharing this maybe with somebody who needs to hear it. You have a great weekend. I love you. I appreciate you. Stay humble and kind, and blessings are on the way. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for listening to Cracked Open. If today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need a little light in their own dark season. Remember, even in brokenness, there's beauty waiting to be found. Every crack is a place where the light can shine through. Until next time, stay true, stay hopeful, and keep your heart open.